Have you ever experienced a Scorpio who was fully present one moment, attentive, intense, almost locked in, and then suddenly gone? No explanation, no gradual distance, just silence. And what makes it more confusing is that nothing seemed wrong on the surface. No clear argument, no obvious shift, just a complete withdrawal that feels abrupt and almost calculated. But here's the part most people misunderstand. When a Scorpio disappears, it's rarely impulsive and it's almost never random. What looks like a sudden exit is usually the result of something they've already been thinking, feeling, or quietly deciding for a while. Scorpios don't always express what's changing internally, but they act on it. And when they do, it can feel like everything's shut off overnight. So, in this video, we're going to break down why Scorpios disappear without warning and what's actually happening beneath the surface when they do. Commitment and responsibilities. When a Scorpio commits to something, they don't do it halfway. Whether it's work, personal goal, or something they've decided matters to their long-term stability, they will pull all of their energy into that one area of their life. And when that happens, everything else can go quiet. Not because it's unimportant, but because in their mind, they can't divide themselves without compromising the outcome. This is where people misinterpret their absence. It can feel like disinterest, detachment, or even avoidance. But for a Scorpio, it's often discipline. They would rather disappear temporarily and handle what needs to be handled properly than stay present and give you a diluted version of themselves. There's also a control element here. Scorpios don't like feeling scattered or pulled in multiple directions. So instead of trying to balance everything at once, they eliminate distractions, go inward, and complete what they've committed to. And during that time, communication isn't always a priority, not because they don't care, but because they're operating in a mode where completion comes before connection. Recharging their energy. Scorpios are known for their intensity, but what people don't always realize is that intensity has a cost. They don't experience connections lightly, they don't engage halfway, and they don't feel in small amounts. So, when they've been emotionally present, especially in something that requires depth, attention, or vulnerability, it can become overwhelming faster than they let on. And instead of expressing that exhaustion outwardly, they internalize it. This is where the withdrawal begins, not as rejection, not as disinterest, but as a form of self preservation. Because if a Scorpio continues to give when they're already drained, it starts to feel inauthentic to them, and they'd rather step away entirely than stay and offer something that doesn't feel real. Their solitude is how they reset. It's how they process everything they've absorbed, every conversation, every emotion, every subtle shift they picked up on that most people wouldn't even notice. And once they've recalibrated, they return, but on their terms, and usually without explaining where they went. Reassessing their emotions. Scorpios don't just feel emotions, they analyze them constantly. Even in moments that seem calm on the surface, there's usually something deeper happening underneath. They're reading between the lines, noticing patterns, questioning intentions, trying to understand not just what they feel, but why they feel it. So when something shifts internally, whether it's confusion, doubt, or emotional overwhelm, they don't always talk about it right away. They withdraw first because for them, expressing something before they fully understand it feels premature and even risky. They need clarity before communication, and that clarity doesn't come from conversation, it comes from solitude, from replaying interactions, from sitting with their instincts, from separating emotion from intuition. When a Scorpio disappears during emotional tension, it's not because they don't care. It's because they care enough to not respond impulsively. They'd rather go silent than say something they can't take back. You said or did something they didn't like. This is one people tend to underestimate because from the outside it often looks like nothing happened. But with a Scorpio, something doesn't have to be loud or obvious to matter. It can be subtle, tone shift, a comment that didn't sit right, an inconsistency between what you said and how you moved. And while they may not react in the moment, they register it. Scorpios are extremely perceptive when it comes to behavior. So when something feels off, even slightly, they don't always confront it right away. They observe first and then they withdraw, not to punish you, but to create distance so they can process what they picked up on without interference. Because once something disrupts their sense of trust or alignment, it doesn't just pass through them, it lingers. And instead of reacting emotionally in real time, they step back and let the full picture reveal itself. This is where their silence can feel the most confusing because to you, everything was fine, but to them, something shifted. And until they understand exactly what that shift means, they'd rather go quiet than engage in something that no longer feels clear. Seeing what you do. Sometimes when a Scorpio pulls back, it's not about creating a reaction, it's about observing one. Because when they're present, engaged, and emotionally invested, your behavior is influenced by that presence. You're responding to them, adjusting to them, meeting them where they are. But when they remove themselves even slightly, that influence disappears, and what's left is you, unprompted, unfiltered, unaware you're being observed. This is where they start to pay attention, not to what you say, but to what you do in their absence. This reveals more than direct interaction ever could, because it answers a deeper question they don't always ask out loud. Who are you when I'm not right in front of you? And the key thing to understand is this isn't always calculated in a manipulative way. It's instinctual. They're trying to understand your nature without interference so they can decide whether what they felt about you still holds up when they step back. Sometimes it's not about distance for the sake of distance, it's about clarity. And clarity for them comes from watching what unfolds when they're no longer part of the equation. Fear of vulnerability. There's a point in every Scorpio connection where the dynamic shifts quietly but noticeably. It's the moment where things stop feeling casual and start feeling real. And for Scorpio, that shift can be unsettling because the deeper they feel, the more they're aware of what's at stake. Their emotional world isn't light, it's consuming, it's all encompassing. So when they sense themselves getting attached, truly attached, it can trigger something instinctive, a need to pull back. Not because they don't want the connection, but because they understand the level of vulnerability it requires to stay in it. And vulnerability to a Scorpio can feel like exposure, like handing someone access to parts of themselves they don't let just anyone see. And with that comes risk. So instead of moving forward while they're still unsure, they retreat. They create distance to regain composure, to ground themselves, to make sure they're not stepping into something that could destabilize them emotionally. Because for a Scorpio, it's not just about liking someone, it's about what happens if they don't protect themselves first. They've already decided something internally. This is one of the most important things to understand about a Scorpio's disappearance. By the time it happens, it's usually not a spur of the moment decision. It just feels that way from the outside. Scorpios process things internally for much longer than people realize. They notice patterns, revisit conversations, track inconsistencies, and sit with their intuition. And all of this is happening quietly without announcing it, without involving you in the process. So while everything may seem normal on the surface, they're already forming conclusions underneath about the connection, about your behavior, about whether things align long term. And once they reach a certain point of clarity, they don't always feel the need to explain it. They act on it, which is why their disappearance can feel so sudden because you're experiencing the result, not the process that led up to it. To them, it's not abrupt, it's resolved. They're processing something you'll never fully know about. Not everything a Scorpio goes through is meant to be shared. They deal with things internally that they don't always bring into their relationships. Past experiences, personal struggles, internal conflicts, emotional cycles that have nothing to do with you. And when something is surfacing within them, their instinct is to go inward, not outward. They don't process in real time with other people. They process alone. So their disappearance may feel connected to you, but in reality, it may have very little to do with you at all. And they won't always clarify that because to them, not everything needs to be explained. Some things are handled in silence and understood only by them. So when a Scorpio disappears, it's easy to interpret it at face value, to assume it was sudden or careless or even intentional in a way that feels personal. But most of the time, it's not that simple because what looks like distance on the outside is usually the result of something that's already taken shape on the inside. And the truth is, Scorpios don't always explain those shifts, not because they don't have reasons, but because they don't always feel the need to make those reasons understood. They process, they decide, and then they act quietly.